Hey, if your webinar feels like a class, then you're teaching. But if it feels like a confrontation, well, you're converting them into sales. Let's get into it. Okay, so we got to talk about some master classes here. The cost to get people to register for a master class these days is just going up and up and up. I think we all see that. Show up rates are just terrible. They're abysmal. And so you've got to make the most out of the people who do show. I mean, that's the point, because the show up rates are so bad. So let's talk about about how you do an intervention. First, you have to lead with a really dangerous premise. Most health coaches, they open up with a bunch of like credentials and agenda slides and that kind of thing, and that's just not super effective. But seven-figure coaches, what they do differently is they open with identity disruption. Okay, so instead of, like, tonight I'm going to teach you how to balance hormones. Okay, they're going to say something instead like, your C-suite role is what's driving your weight gain, not your hormones. You see the difference there? Because they're calling somebody out and they're talking about their identity right there, because most people, their identity is wrapped up in their work or their role in life, whatever that is. So they may also say something like, you don't have a metabolism problem, you have a control problem. Well, that's a disruptor, because nobody's talking about that. Nobody's seeing that out there, and they don't look at it that way. They think about other things. And what this does is essentially three things. It challenges her identity. Okay, it creates discomfort, which we've got to have discomfort, and it signals this is not polite wellness advice. And that's how you open an intervention. I used to say this all the time, is that you have to, and I've been seeing other people say this recently. I don't know why I quit saying it years ago, but you have to create some kind of emotional, feeling when somebody sees what this is about. And it could be a good one or it could be a bad one. It doesn't really matter, frankly, but something has to trigger an emotion in them. Otherwise, you're not going to get anybody to show up. That's the problem. It's all rote. It's all just the same old thing out there. Here's another masterclass. Nobody even knows what masterclass means, because that's what everybody says. So people just sign up mindlessly. And what you're hoping is that they'll show up like they're in enough pain that particular day and time to show up. And so the other thing that people don't think about is when somebody registers for a masterclass, they've got a million other things going on in their lives, just like we all do. So if they registered 2 weeks ago, they're not even going to remember. It doesn't matter how many emails you send them. They're not going to remember, and even if they do, the chances of them of showing up ready to go are small. So it can't come across like just a typical old everyday masterclass. You got to enter the conversation already going on in her head. So you can't teach first. What you want to do is mirror her instead, if that makes sense. You want to say something like, have you ever thought, I can negotiate 8-figure deals, but I can't lose 12 pounds. Okay. Now think about who you're talking to when you say something like that. She's obviously, a very educated, very powerful person who's used to negotiating these massive deals, but the 10 to 12 pounds she can't seem to get off her, get that weight off, just seems to, boggle her mind, because she's smart. She just can't figure it out. She might also be thinking things like, oh, I track everything. I train hard. So why does my body ignore me? I mean, that's what she wants to know. She can't get it. She doesn't understand. And that's the approach that you have to come from. So when she hears her own thoughts out loud, then you've become the authority without having to throw out a bunch of credentials. That's why the credentials really aren't that important, or at least not nearly as important as you think they are. And I'm not saying that they aren't important in general. They're just not necessarily important on the masterclass. They just want to know, is this going to work for them ultimately? Okay. Now, next, you've got to control the frame before the offer. And you do that by redefining the problem. So instead of talking about calories, you might say, your calendar is driving your weight gain, not your kitchen. That's a disruptor. Or you're trying to run a 45-year-old body on a 25-year-old strategy. Okay, you see the difference there? Now the advice they're seeing everywhere else looks outdated and plain wrong. Your method is the next logical step, and that's what they have to be thinking. So Now you're going to want to use strategic demonstration, not hype. Talk about one specific shift. You might say something like, one of my clients, a COO, was eating 1,300 calories and training 6 days a week. We raised her calories. We cut her training in half. We fixed her sleep timing. And then 8 weeks later, she was down 9 pounds, without white knuckling anything. So there you just demonstrated the principle instead of claiming what you do. That's the difference. Most people just claim it. They don't actually give them a real world example. And that's how you get them to have a mindset shift when you're approaching this. Because this kind of stuff is huge. You've literally got to engineer emotional states. You've got to move her deliberately. So first, you'll lean into like her frustration. You're doing everything right and it's not working, right? And then you might do recognition, right? So this isn't random, there's a pattern, okay? And now you want to give her some relief. You're not broken, the strategy is. Then next, you've got to urgency. You've got to have some urgency. And remember what I always say, urgency at every point. I can't say that enough. And so with this urgency, you might say something like, every year this gets harder if the system doesn't change. And lastly, give her what's inevitable. If nothing changes in the system, then nothing changes on the scale. See, emotion is sequenced. It's not accidental. Now, establish authority without begging. That's what you have to do. No defensive credential stacking. You need to draw lines. Look, if you're looking for detoxes, this isn't for you. Or, I work with women who run companies, not crash diets. See, you don't try to serve everybody, you filter. And then last, you'll create inevitability before you pitch. Before the offer appears, collapse the alternatives. You can keep losing the same 10 pounds every year, or you can adjust the system and be done with it, or something like that. Maybe you've optimized businesses. It's time to optimize your internal environment. I don't really like that, but I think you get my point. So by the time you present your offer, it feels like the next logical step. That's the difference. See, most health coaches, they just teach information. 7-figure health coaches, they restructure identity and belief. That's an intervention. That's the difference. So if your masterclass is just slides and science, you're educating. If it challenges identity and collapses the wrong model, you're converting. And if you want to know how 7-figure coaches drive traffic to masterclasses like this without burning cash, watch the next video.